Hello Grommet Gamers, it's been a while since I've done a vinyl record kind of upload, so today I am going to start a new little series, just going through my full record collection. I don't think I've ever kind of done a full kind of retrospective on my vinyl collection before, so in this first one we're going to focus on my earlier records, so we're talking the earliest record I owned to around 1970. To preface this video, here is a lovely copy of the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, but this isn't going to count, even though it is an album that came out in 1966. It is a 50th anniversary repressing, so very much not a record from the 60s, actually a very, very recent record. So stuff like this, my repressings, we'll do that in a separate video. But apart from that, there's a few records in here that are not from the 50s and 60s, from the 70s, but certain things like my Beatles collection. Obviously, a lot of my Beatles catalogue is original 60s pressings, but I'd throw the solo Beatles albums in there as well, just to make it one separate category, Beatles and Beatles related. So apart from that, let's get into some of my favourite records from my earlier collection. So, start off with, we've got some decent old shellac 78 records, and we're going to start with Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis Presley. This was before he moved on to RCA, so it's on his master's voice there, and it's backed with I Was the One right there, so the lovely His Master's Voice label. Next up, we have, I believe, Party by Elvis Presley. This is when he moved to RCA in around 1957, when he got off Sun in Memphis and moved on to the bigger and better label RCA. Well, I wouldn't say it's a better label than Sun. Sun is obviously quite a cult classic label for record collectors. Don't You Think It's Time by Elvis right there. And then his classic Christmas single, Santa Bring My Baby Back to Me, backed with Santa Claus is Back in Town there. You might notice that all these 78s have the same sticker on the front. I got these all from a charity shop for literally £1 each. Brilliant deals. You know, certain things like these, if you can find them in the charity shops, you can always pick them up, especially early rockers and rockabilly on 78s. They're pretty hard to come by. So next up we got Pegasus by Buddy Holly. That one has a small crack in it, unfortunately, but actually it doesn't really affect the playback, because it's not like cracked as in it's missing a piece out of the record. It just has a small crack down the side. But yeah, Peggy Sue, Holly's first record. And then we have Raining in My Heart by Buddy Holly, backed with It Doesn't Matter Anymore, the song that Paul Anka wrote for Buddy Holly. And I'm pretty sure at 59, this might be his last ever kind of record before, obviously, he boarded that plane on that very, very sad day. Next up, talking about Paul Anka, we have Diana, his breakout single. He was only 16 when he wrote this, I believe. Backed with Don't Gamble with Love. Not a particularly rare record, this one. I think they mass-produced Diana. I think the story goes is that he turned up to New York, or was it Los Angeles one day with a ukulele, and he just went into every recording place that he could go into, every like publisher, and just sang this song to them until eventually he got picked up. So yeah. And then finally for my 78, we've got a whole lot of shaking going on by Jerry Lee Lewis, who of course passed away quite recently, backed with It'll Be Me. Not his second most popular record, of course. Jerry Lee Lewis known for Great Balls of Fire. So those are my 78s. Now let's move on to some singles. We're back with a bit of Elvis with King Creole. The earlier these RCA and the earlier singles from the UK have the triangle centerpiece, not the more circular one that you'll see on later ones. But there's King Creole by Elvis. One Night. There you'll see, this one's from 1960, you'll see the change in the centerpiece. Make Me Know It. Return to Sender. Lonely Man. And She's Not You. That ends my, well, not actually, I've got one here from 1977 just to add on to the end of my Elvis's. Way down. I'm pretty sure this single came out after he had that heart attack shit on the loo that one day. So yeah, that's it for my Elvis. Now we'll move on to some more earlier 60s, late 50s stuff with some Roy Orbison. Here Comes That Song Again. Then we've got Falling by Roy Orbison. And then Blue Bayou by Roy Orbison there as well. That's one of my dad's personal favourites. Next we have Johnny Kidd in the Pirates, Shaking All Over. This is one of my favourite rock songs, rock and roll style songs. Of course The Who covered this. Shaking all over. Class song. Wonderful Land by The Shadows. Oh. Then we got Wild One by Bobby Rydell. Of course Iggy Pop covered that one with the Stooges. Bit of Fats Domino in there as well with Country Boy. And now we move on to British Invasion shit. So here are my Holly singles. We have Stay, their debut single, a bit of a rarer variation, this one with the Sold in the UK text on the label there. Then we have Keep Off That Friend of Mine, Just One Look. Hollies in their early days were a very single orientated band. Most of these 60s British Invasion bands had to be, because the price of a LP was surprisingly large for even at the time, records being really the only way you could listen to music. Not really until the late 60s that cassettes even started to come out, and even then they were quite a luxury to own. Here's an interesting one, I'm Alive by the Hollies. Back with I'm Alive by the Hollies, a printing error that one. It does play the normal B-side on the other side, but not necessarily, you know, mega rare or valuable, but it's cool and quirky to own in the collection. Oh. Then we have I Can't Let Go by the Hollies. And then finally, cutting way past the Graham Nash era with Hey Willie, one of my favourite later Hollies tracks. So I'm gonna pause for a second because I am dying for a shit right now. And we'll get onto my Beatles in a second. That was a refreshing shit. So now we're going to move on to the Beatles. I don't really need to explain my opinion on the Beatles. Not just musically, but as more of like a collectible kind of thing. There's a lot of different variations of Beatles records and stuff, and it's one of those bands that you can really collect and have multiple copies of different vinyls and shit like that with little differences on them and stuff. A lot of people love to collect the Beatles, me too. And so yeah, I'm not going to really talk much into each of these records, but I'm going to go through them very fast. So we have From Me to You, She Loves You. This is my better copy of I Wanna Hold Your Hand. This is almost unplayed. And then quite a shoddy secondary copy of I Wanna Hold Your Hand there. Can't Buy Me Love. If I Fell. That is my good copy of If I Fell. And I've got, again, a much more shoddy copy of it there. Help. Got 2 copies of Ticket to Ride, but they are slightly different on this. They still both have the Parlophone Co on it, so they're both still 1965, early 1965 pressings, but if you can see, I'll turn it around to the other side, it might be easier. As you can see, this copy, there are some brackets around the 7XC thing, and on this one there is not. And also, I think that the writing is a little different, a little more squeezed together on the first one I showed. Then we got one of their most popular singles, We Can Work It Out, backed with Day Tripper. And my personal favourite Beatles single of all time, Paperback Writer, and Rain, Ringo's drumming, sublime. Then we got Hello Goodbye, All You Need Is Love, Lady Madonna, quite a hard Beatles single that actually, Hey Jude, Get Back, and then Yesterday, back with I Should Have Known Better. This wasn't an original Beatles single, but they put it as part of the 1976 singles set that I believe my local garage back in the day, back in 1976, they just had like a little box with all these different Beatles singles in it, part of that set. And yeah, they were kind of like, you know, almost in convenience stores, like a collectible kind of, you know, like, you know, collect the Beatles singles and all that shit. Some EPs here by the Beatles, Twist and Shout, possibly the most sold extended play record ever. Long Tall Sally, and then we have Magical Mystery Tour right here with sides 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So yeah, those are my Beatles singles. Going to some solo Beatles stuff now. We have Give Peace a Chance and Remember Love in the original picture sleeve that came in from 1969. Mind Games by John Lennon there. One of my dad's favourite John Lennon tracks. Ringo Starr's Don't Come Easy. You're 16 by Ringo. And then Another Day, Paul McCartney. And Jet! Woo, woo, woo! So yeah, that finishes off my Beatles singles. So let's get on to the rest of my 60s singles. So we've got You Really Got Me by the Kinks. Of course, one of the most classic singles of the 1960s. Kinks are such a brilliant band. And then we got Mr. Pleasant there by the Kinks as well. Do I Diddy Diddy by Manfred Mann. And their number 1 single, Mighty Quinn, when they moved to Fontana. And then we've got one for all you Liverpool fans, You'll Never Walk Alone by Jerry and the Pacemakers. And How Do You Do It by Jerry and the Pacemakers. Got a single Dave Clark 5 here. Can't You See That She's Mine? And then Bring It On Home to Me by Newcastle's finest, The Animals. And then we got a little novelty record here, Lily the Pink. Mike McGear was in this comedy trio, Paul McCartney's brother. And we got the Trogs here with I Want You, not their best record. Of course, the Trogs, really a one-hit wonder band with Wild Thing in 1966. which hit #1. Don't know what this is, Los Brios. Couldn't tell you, it's just in my collection. We got Question by the Moody Blues there, 1970, that one. Donovan's big hit, Sunshine Superman, great single, very easy to find as well in charity shops, stuff like that. If you find one, pick it up, it's a brilliant single. Then we got Daydream Believer by the Monkees. I do love me a bit of the Monkees, and it was stored in this late 70s, early 80s Weetabix box for some reason. And the lights all went down in Massachusetts. Yep, early Bee Gees. Before they started singing like they got kicked in the balls, all of them. Make It Easy on Yourself, the Walker Brothers. Scott Walker went off and did his own thing after that. Pretty sure he was one of the first musicians that said ass in a song or something like that. In a stupid ass way, wasn't it? He said in one of his songs. Good Vibrations, the Beach Boys, just a capital classic. And we got a bit of later Billy Fury with Baby What You Want Me to Do. And then the final two singles in my 60s ones, which aren't from the 60s, they're from 1970. We have The Seeker by The Who. And finally, of course, Paranoid by Black Sabbath, backed with The Wizard. So yeah, those are all my singles in 78 in my 60s collection. Let's move on and look at some LPs. So, moving on to LPs now, we have Gene Vincent's debut album here, Gene Vincent and his the Blue Caps. Gene Vincent, a great little rocker from the definitely more on the heavy side of rockabilly, and famously he was in the car crash that killed off Eddie Cochran. But yeah, this is an original 1957. So rare you see LPs from this time period, especially in England. Just going to show you the lovely Capitol label there, early Capitol label, and it even has this little Emitex record cleaning cloth with it as well, so that's always a cool bonus. Next we have The Shadows. Whoop, don't want them all to fall over. Got The Shadows. I really like The Shadows. I think they're a great instrumental band. Their drummer's brilliant. And they have some really nice covers as well. But what's weird is that these are very common, very, very common. I mean, you'll find them in charity shops for £1, you know what I mean? Don't know if it's because they were mass-produced, these Shadows records, or if it's just because it seems to be with Cliff Richard as well, that they're very easy to come by and very cheap. So I'd say for like a starting collector, if you find some of these Shadows albums in a charity shop, pick them up, because they're not, you know, trashy records. It's actually some really nice instrumental rock songs on them, early rock songs. And even, for example, this one here, Out of the Shadows, this is an original. Jesus, all the records are going to fall down everywhere. This is an original stereo pressing on the this lovely looking Columbia label. Simply marvellous Columbia label there, and it's in almost perfect condition. I just found that in a charity shop for £1, so I mean it's always great when I find some Shadows. Moving on to the Beatles now, we have Please Please Me. This is an awful shape, but it is on the original black and gold Parlophone label. Pretty trash though, unfortunately. I'm just gonna put the records down here and show them one at a time because they're all gonna fall over eventually. Got With the Beatles, again pretty trashy copy, but the record itself is in nice condition. We got a 2-box EMI pressing of A Hard Day's Night with just the 2 flip overs, as you can see there, none on the side. We got just a copy of Beatles for Sale with no sleeve. Help. Again, a lot of my Beatles albums are quite trashy, but the records themselves is what I'm interested in. They play really nice. Here is a loud cut pressing of Rubber Soul with -1 on both sides. Again, you'd see that and think that this must skip like all hell, but actually the record's really nice. Here it is right there. As you can see, very few scratches on it. Then we have a lovely first stereo of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Just show you the lovely Parlophone stereo label there. And then, even though these aren't from the 60s, like I said, I've added these on as well. We have the Beatles 67 to 70. This weird Goodbye Beatles album by the Johnny Dunn Singers. Plastic Ono Band. Absolutely sensational album that. McCartney's first solo album. And then Band on the Run. So that is all my Beatles related records in my collection at the moment. I used to have almost all of them. But then a little thing called university happened and I was suddenly alone, independent, with not a lot of money. So those had to be sold off. Next we've got Would You Believe by the Hollies. Again, this is a pretty easy record to find in charity shops and shit like that. It's probably the Hollies' worst album, to be honest, apart from when you get on to shit like the Hollies Sing Dylan and all that shite. This is very, very lazily done by the band, but not as lazy as the album that came after it, which is of course For Certain, because the Hollies' greatest album by a country mile. Then we have, I've thrown this in between 2 Hollies albums. This is a very, again, charity shop thought of this. This is literally just a Music for Pleasure repressing of Evolution by the Hollies, which would have come after For Certain because, and before Butterfly, which is a delightfully psychedelic record. This is right when Graham Nash got his teeth into the Hollies as a band itself, but also this is his last album with the band before he left and kind of pursued his own solo stuff for a bit, then eventually found himself in, of course, Stills, Nash and Young. And then my final Hollies album is this really lovely Canadian hits of the Hollies. The Hollies weren't really popular in America or Canada. Not really popular at all in North America, to be honest. Really was just an English kind of popular band, so that they didn't really have a lot of these Hollies albums. But this is just a lovely one of the best Hollies compilations, and this is part of the Capital 6000 series that was from Canada, and it's on a lovely capital label there. As I try to show you, my camera has taken a small fall. Okie dokie, next up, Deep Purple and Rock, classic album, Richie Blackmore, Ian Pace, and then Machine Head there as well, just because it's the other Deep Purple album I have, even though that's a bit too far into the 70s really. We got lovely first pressing of Tommy by The Who. Of course, just a classic album. One of these albums, this is an album that really inspired my musical career as a scriptwriter as well. I love albums that have a story to them. And then we have Meaty, Big and Bouncy by The Who. Well, again, compilation album, but probably their best. Got that for Christmas. And then these are pretty cool. These are the track record. Basically, these are called Backtrack. And it's basically just a best of from track records. And I've got 3 lovely covers as well with, I guess it's a some kind of like Vietnamese kid or something just having a fag on the cover. Of course, the Vietnam War, these came out in 1969, 1970, still very prevalent at the time. And basically these just have side 1 Who songs, side 2 Jimi Hendrix songs. Again, very cheap. If you find these lying around, they're absolutely worth purchase. Talking of Jimi Hendrix, here is the Eternal Fire of Jimi Hendrix with Curtis Knight. I believe this is on the Hallmark label. And I think this is the only time this was ever really released. Until, I guess, a lot later on with, you know, what would probably be like the Are You Experienced Super Mega Deluxe version or whatever. And then we got the Monkees. Got just a Kinks compilation here, Lola. Some of their best songs on here, but a lot of these are, you know, what they would call, you know, at the time, you know, like engineered stereo sound or whatever, and they're awful. It's just a stereo reverb effect over the original mono recordings. Got this Herman's Hermits debut album. Never been a big fan of Herman's Hermits, to be honest. I had to sing I'm On to Something Good in primary school as part of a Through the Decades primary school play thing. Here we have the Animals debut album, a great Geordie band. We got just the best of the Beach Boys here, which came out the same year as collection of Beatles oldies but goldies. It seemed that EMI really were on, in 1966, a big push to release a lot of these compilation albums. And then we have the Moody Blues, In Search of the Lost Chords. Not their best album, but definitely their best cover. It's just a beautiful cover, this. And then finally, we have a early 1970 repressing of Cream's debut album here. And that is it for my 60s collection. Thank you for watching, people. Next up, I'm going to do my 70s, I guess, and then probably can fit 80s, 90s and modern into kind of one big kind of video as its own. But the 60s definitely takes up most of my collection, I'll say. But yeah, that was every kind of 50s, 60s, early 70s record that I own in my collection at the moment. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.